Aaron, thank you very much for being here. I think that the discussion we're going to have is crucial, not only for the Ayn Rand Con and the subjects that have been discussed in Argentina, in Brazil, and also are going to be discussed in Mexico and Costa Rica, because in Latin America, there's almost no conception that there can be a morality without religion. And there was a previous interview that we did with you and Keith Lockich, where we talked about how can there be a universe without a God? For most people in my continent, this is impossible because the universe is perfect. Life is so beautiful. Look at the animals. Look at humans, right? Where did all this perfect design came from if there's no God? And we talked about that, yeah, in fact, there is a universe without a God. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yes, there is a universe without God. It's the only universe that exists. But it's worth thinking about the question. I mean, can there be a universe without God? So what the question is asking is, doesn't the universe have to have a cause? And then the specific answer that's being given is, yeah, it does have a cause, has to have a cause. And then we identify the cause as, well, that's God. But it's worth asking, what does it mean to think that the universe has a cause? And if you think about what the universe is the sum total of existence. It's another perspective, it's another word for an effect, but it's another perspective on existence as such. Existence doesn't come from anywhere. From where would it come? It could only come from something that exists. So if you think about the universe as it's everything. It's everything that exists. It doesn't have a source, a cause. It can't have a source or cause. It would have, because the source or cause would have to be something that exists. So existence always exists, always has existed, always will exist. There's no alternative to existence. So to think about, well, where did the cause come from? Or where did the universe come from? What's the cause? There's something wrong with the question. The question is premised on the idea that there's an answer to that question, or that there could be an answer to that question, and there isn't. So you have to accept the universe. I mean, the way Ayn Rand put it is existence exists. I mean, you have to accept that as an absolute. I think what happens is people think of the universe as, where do the planets come from? Where does that come from? And they think of more specific existence, like specific items of existence. And they ask well, those things come from somewhere, right? I mean, babies come from somewhere, squirrels come from somewhere, right? The planets formed at some point out of whatever they formed out of, right? So, but you can't think of the entire universe, so all of existence that way, and then reach out and think, what must be the cause? Because you'd have to do what they do, is reach out and find some supernatural thing, something that somehow stands outside of existence.
Outside of the cosmos.
Yeah. So
that
there's already
the
kind
cosmos.
of, yeah.
And the other thing is that then people say, well, you don't have the answers to everything. You don't know where life started. You don't know where the consciousness started. And since you don't have scientific answers to those questions yet, you can say, then religion must be right. And so, yes, something created this universe because your science doesn't give me the answer. So therefore, my God is correct and your science is wrong.
Well, there's several things to think about that. One is, we know a tremendous amount about nature, a massive amount about nature. So it's not like, well, you don't have the answers. There are questions that we don't have a full answer to yet, for sure, in science. But that's what the pursuit of truth looks like. There's always questions out there to think about. We're not at omniscience, right? So there's still all sorts of things. But to come to know and to come to learn, to come to form answers to, and so that's great. That's part of what science is about. But in order to say that, well, you don't have answers for those things, so what I'll do is in those gaps, I'll place God as an explanation. But to do that, you don't actually provide an explanation. I mean, a supernatural being, a divine being, it's necessarily unintelligible to us. I mean, you can slap on some characteristics, but it's not that you've ever met that or observed it and you know what it is. So in effect, what they're doing is, you don't have a scientific explanation for this yet. And so my explanation that I'll substitute for your lack of one is a magical being did it by magic. I mean, you can dignify that and say, a supernatural being or a divine being, but that means the same thing in the end. It's so how did God create the universe? How did God create animals? How did he create life? The answer is, by some divine means. Well, what was the means? How'd that work? Was it pushes and pulls? What did he do? I don't know. Something magical. In other words, it just,
Boom.
yeah, boom. And it's like, that's your explanation? I mean, and what an explanation does is it explains, it helps you reach understanding of a given fact. And that gives you no understanding. It's better to say, I don't actually know how consciousness arose at some point or at what point, and what is it made of something, so to speak, or is it just a function or an aspect of something? Like, is it an action? Like, how do you think about that? Well, that's a good philosophic question, but it's, and in part, a scientific question, like what are the material underpinnings of consciousness and so on. But it's better epistemologically, better for the way you orient yourself to knowledge, to leave the answer to a question open and say, I don't know, versus put a mystical, magical explanation, which doesn't even serve the function of explanation.
Carl Sagan said that who's more arrogant, right? The person that looks at this book, that it was not even one book, it was like 70-something books written with 1,000 years of difference between all of them, that were never intended to be one whole thing, and say, this is the whole truth. Or somebody that says, well, actually, I don't know. Let me look and observe the universe and see what it can teach me. Who's more arrogant? Because always the explanation of religious people is, oh, you're so cocky and arrogant because you believe in science. And it's like, no, actually, I think that you are more arrogant believing that your God, because from all the gods, is always the particular geographical God of the place that you were born into, the one that has the answers. Now,
I'll pray for you, Gloria. I'll pray for you.
I'll pray for you.
I'll pray
Thank
for you.
you. Thank
Because
you.
I always find that arrogant.
Yeah.
I was at a bookstore looking at some books, and people were like, oh, they asked me what I do. I said, I teach philosophy. And they said, oh, well, how do you rationalize your faith or something like that? I was like, oh, I don't rationalize I don't have any faith. I said, we'll pray for you.
Yeah.
And it was like, I mean, that's kind of arrogant. It's kind of condescending. It's like,
Yeah.
it's not, it's funny how they turn it to arrogance, because often what it is not, some people can be arrogant and it's irritating, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes I think what triggers people toward thinking about it in terms of arrogance is it's a confidence that you know what's true. And that's perceived as arrogant, because then the other, well, how could you possibly know? I don't know. I just go along with the crowd, and my mom told me God exists. And then here you saying, oh, you actually know this is a false view, and then it comes across to them as, how can you be so certain? How can you know?
Yeah.
And you can know.
And also the example you gave in Brazil of your student, that you said, like, look, if I give you 17 arguments of why you should question your religion or God, and all of them are, irrefutable.
Irrefutable.
Or refutable. Will you still believe in what you believe? And he answered yes.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's like, well, reason is not gonna cut it, like you.
Not with that person. Yeah.
Not with that person in specific. And let's say that it does. Let's say that, watching this interview, some people agree, okay, there can be a universe with no God. Now, if there is a universe with no God, what's the purpose of being a good person? If there's not like old guy watching me from the sky, seeing if I'm, committing sins and behaving good, then why are not all of us just being nihilistic and doing whatever we want? Like, why should I be moral if there's no God in this universe?
So for anybody actually asking themselves that question, I'll give an answer to that. But for anybody actually asking themselves that question, rather than putting it in that abstract way, well, why not be a nihilist? Why not just go around and kill everybody?
Yeah.
Ask yourself, would you do that? And why wouldn't you? Do you have reasons for pursuing your life in a certain kind of way, for pursuing some kind of values, for living in a certain kind of way you think may actually make sense, even if there's nobody watching you, but like certain ways that actually make sense? Would you do that? You just run around, go crazy man, and kill people? Is that what you do?
Yeah.
And the answer is probably like, well, I mean, and of course not. I mean, that would be a horrible life, and that's a lead to a more rational answer for why you should be more. It's not the answer, but it's a lead to thinking about that. But what I would say is, you have to think about, like, why does the whole issue of, morality is a question of values. It's like, what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong, what is worth pursuing and attaining, what is worth avoiding, shunning. And how does that whole issue come up? It doesn't come up because somebody wrote a book and said you shouldn't do A, B, and C. It comes up because living organisms face a constant alternative between life and death, pleasure and pain, joy and suffering. And this is how, and they experience the world as value laden, in effect. They experience, put it this way, they experience values in the world. They experience something as pleasurable, as enjoyable, as delightful in some way, and other things as painful, distressing, depressing. Right? Some things cause you to not get what you want, and some things allow you to get what you want. So you have to think that that's the basic alternative. It's that which supports my life. There are things in the world that support, sustain, enhance, enrich, advance your life. And there are certain things that harm, hinder, destroy it. And that's where you get this whole orientation that there are values in the world. There's the pro-me and there's the anti-me. There's the pro-my life and the anti-my life. And that's the way this whole issue of values even comes up. If we didn't experience the world like that, it just would never come up. Somebody says, live your life this way versus that way. Like, why? And there's no answer to that because, what would motivate you to want to live in a certain kind of way? So, can there be a morality without God? Sure, because you have to. But then you have to have. So the question would then be, what should your perspective on values be? Mm-hmm. And Ayn Rand's perspective is this is a perspective I agree with, but Ayn Rand's perspective is your attitude to values should be to embrace them. Mm-hmm. To identify what values actually sustain, support, and advance your life, and go out and achieve them, and figure out how to achieve them, embrace them. And you figure out the kinds of things that hinder, harm, destroy, cancel your life, and you avoid those things. So your orientation to values should be to embrace them because they enrich and advance and sustain your life. And you avoid the other things because they do the opposite.
Problem is, how do you define what values are? Because for most people, being moral means sacrifice, altruism. What is good is for you not to be thinking about yourself and about your happiness, right? You are more good and more moral if you live this super miserable life because you're sacrificing for others, and there's gonna be a bigger heaven, right? Mm-hmm. The more miserable you are in this life and the more you sacrifice, the bigger the piece of heaven that you're gonna get in the other life. And that's being moral. Those are the values. So it seems that the whole concept of can there be a moral without a God or in this universe, it's like, well, let's first define morality. And if we define morality as something that it's for your own individual life, you being the agent of that life, grasping that concept for many people is like, no, but that means that you're going to be, harming everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think I'd say two things to that. One is it's useful, I think very useful and instructive to realize that the moral framework that most of people accept nowadays is coming from centuries and centuries of Christianity and the effects of Christianity or Judeo-Christian religion and its effects over time, even though it's been secularized in certain kind of ways. And what's helpful is to look back at pre-Christian ethics. So if you look, substantive moral theory, not just some guy says do A or B. It's you look back at Aristotle or even Plato. Plato has his mystical side, but so there's or Plato or Aristotle or the Epicureans and stuff, and their view in general in Greek ethics, because their gods didn't tell them what to do.
Yeah.
They didn't say, here are the commands and follow this, and they do whatever they do, but they don't give you a morality. So their whole view was how you think about ethics is you formulate a conception of what the goal is. What does the best life look like? What for a human being? What does the best life look like? An enviable life, the kind of life that you would really, really want. And then figure out, well, what do I need to do to achieve that kind of life? What virtues of character do I need to embody or to practice if I'm going to achieve that? Like, do I need wealth or do I just need virtue or does it involve a life like in politics as well? Or does it involve the contemplative life of a philosopher or what? But they're all trying to have, and they have different answers to the question, but it's all almost basically to the same question. What's the best life look like for a human being? The most enviable life, the full, rich life, the happy life. And how do we go about achieving that? And I think that's a very rational, sensible way to think about it. Yeah. But it's important to look at that. This is not an alternative to morality. It's an alternative conception of morality. So often, what people, I mean, this whole legacy of sort of Judeo-Christian ethics, and that there's this cosmic other that we're supposed to really sacrifice to place always above ourselves, and always we're below. And there's always the idea is that life is about service, and it's about subservience to some other, whether it's divine, the divine other God, or if it's just, love your neighbor as yourself and so on.
Yeah.
But that's one kind of conception of morality, and it's not the only one. So this whole legacy has taught people to equate some kind of altruist morality of sacrifice and service with morality. So when you offer a different view of morality, a different conception of the content of morality, like what you should practice, and a different conception of the goal of morality, your own happiness, that strikes them as, wait, that's not morality.
Yeah.
No, that's the opposite of morality. That can't be morality. And they have what Ayn Rand called a frozen abstraction. That's where you take a wide concept like an automobile, and it stands in your mind as Toyota, and you show them a Ford, like nope, that's not an automobile, because like it's stuck at one particular concrete, like Toyota or whatever it is. And I think the same thing happens with morality. It's morality equals altruism, and it's not true. It's not at all true. It's not historically true. There are all sorts of different conceptions that philosophers have had about how to think about morality, what is its goal, what is its content, and they're not all altruistic.
Right.
Although too many of them, I think, have.
Don't do to others as you would do to yourself, but that self shouldn't have happiness. So if you translate that, is more like accept that others are going to be miserable as you are accepting that you are going to be miserable, right? Like that's the translation of that kind of morality. And when you're like, no, wait, it means that you can be selfish and happy, and others can also be selfish and happy, and we can all coexist in that respect. And I think it's confusing because also religion teaches you not to kill and not to rob or steal private property from others, right? So it's like this weird mixture of don't kill, don't steal, be mindful that there's this mystical God that somehow gives you free will, but at the same time, your destiny is already written. And if you do as what he says, you please him, but at the same time, that means that you have to sacrifice. It's like so many contradictions that even if somebody wants to live 100% morally by those guidelines, they contradict themselves.
Yeah. And often what people will say is, well, isn't there something good, about like biblical values, if you want to put it that way, or the commandments and so on? And it's like, well, in some kind of context, sure. I mean, but most cultures that have survived, most societies or civilizations that have survived it's not rocket science, right? So it's there's nothing deep in there. So the idea is, don't kill people, or don't sleep with your neighbor's wife, and don't take his chicken. It's like, well, yeah, because you can't get along like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not rocket science. I mean, most people realize if we're going to get along together, we can't cut each other's throats, and we can't do things that regularly and historically observably instigate revenge, retribution. This is the kind of thing that happens. And so it's like, okay, so we have prohibitions against those things, right? So the most societies.
It also puzzles me that within that morality of don't, kill or steal your neighbor's chicken, no religion put down,
Sorry.
don't go and kill the other because they have a different God. No religion considers that. It's like they have the thing of don't kill, don't steal, except if your neighbor has a different God, then you can go and kill him because your God is the correct one. And then morality or that kind of morality, it's completely thrown away.
I think there's an element, there's a tribal element to it.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about the history of all sorts of various kinds of religions to know just how far they would take that in terms of like if somebody else believes in another god, but it's well known that happens in history all the time. Just how widespread, I'm not sure, but I mean, if you're looking for, let me actually go back to a point that we were talking about. I was saying that for many people, altruism just is morality.
Yeah.
And so you were saying, well, if you say, well, what about pursuing your own happiness, your own self-interest? The mind automatically goes, that means you're going to live an immoral life.
Yeah.
And it's an aspect of freezing the concept of morality at the specific notion of an altruist morality. Because if you're saying, no, I don't want to sacrifice for other people, I don't want to have my life be a sacrificial one, I want it to be a pursuit of my own happiness, I want to be a rich and wonderful life. Then they say, oh, so then anything goes, right? You just do what you want.
Yeah.
Like, what's the connector?
Yeah.
Like, what's the middle term between I want to pursue my own happiness, I want to pursue my own goals, to that means that you would trample over other people. It's the implication is then it means having no moral compass, no moral principles, no moral framework that would guide you. But that's what a rational morality. It's the work of a rational morality to then give you that framework. If it's not enough to say, go for it. Pursue your happiness. Just go. It's like, well, it's too whimsical because it's like, well, what does it mean to be happy? What does it mean to pursue my happiness? What goals should I pursue? Do I pursue my happiness by just getting a lot of stuff and then I just grab other people's stuff? Is that there's no guidance there?
Yeah.
It's just Ayn Rand said that the issue of who should be the beneficiary of values, like should it be self or others, is just a preliminary issue in ethics. It's about a basic orientation, but it doesn't give you the content of morality.
Yeah.
So you have to say, well, these are the actual kinds of values that you should be pursuing. You should value reason, and you should live, so and these are the kind of virtues you should practice if you want to be successful in that life. And Ayn Rand's views, it's rationality, integrity, justice, courage. It's pride. There's a whole host of virtues that one actually needs to really work to sort of embody and to practice and to live by if you're going to be successful. So part of what a self-interested or a rational, but I shouldn't equate those two. Part of the issue of a rational morality, it has to give you content, it has to give you principles, and that's what's going to give you the guidance. It can't just say, pursue your happiness, and then
That's
period.
It. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's precisely something that I present as evidence or examples, right? Latin America is a continent that constantly is immoral. Every day there are murders, there are thefts, there is high levels of corruption, domestic violence, child abuse, in a very deeply religious territory. Whereas I look at countries like the Czech Republic, which is the most atheist of all Europe, or Estonia, and in the places that there is no religion, people behave morally. In the places where there is more religion, there is more violation of human rights. It's a fact. Even if people would say, well, but religious people behave more morally, magically. Like somehow religion doesn't stop them from being moral. It's not true.
Yeah. Or at least I'll say at minimum, I don't think religious people are necessarily more moral than non-religious people. I don't think there's a reason to think that. They might feel more guilty, but I don't know. I don't know if that's true either.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's any reason to think. And then, are they more moral or less moral? By what standard? By what standard of morality? I don't think it's moral to live by faith. I don't think it's moral to live by commandments that you don't understand and you blindly follow and adhere to hope to get to a fantasy land. I don't think that's a moral way of life. I think it's a way of throwing away your mind in just blind hope of achieving something, some blessed world in some other dimension or something. I think a moral life means it's a life of reason. In other words, reason. Reason is your faculty of knowledge. And and by that means it's your faculty of survival. So you live your life as a human being by following reason, by pursuing the values that actually sustain and advance your life, and achieving them. And from my perspective, that's what a moral life is. To the extent that a Christian or like a person as a believer, let's put it that way, just kind of neutrally and broadly, to the extent that a believer adopts that. He's living a moral life, but I think that what happens is that it's the mysticism that gets in the way, and it calls for sacrifice.
What's easier for people to grasp? The fact that there can be a universe with no God, or the fact that there can be morality with no God, in your experience teaching?
Wow. I don't know. I don't know if I have an answer to that, because I think they're so connected. And religion is so embedded into the framework, people's framework. So they just those both stand together, and so I guess the question is there a similarity between the two? It's I'd have to think about that exactly. I mean, there's got to be a similarity there, but no, I don't know that one is harder than the other. I think once you can get away from the notion that there's some sort of creator or a god, I think it's easier to then start looking at reality, start looking at nature, start looking at human nature, start looking at human life and human needs, and start thinking of a way to base ethics. I mean, this is what objectivism does. It says when you're identifying something as a good, you're identifying a causal relationship between that thing, whether it's an iPhone or a house or a sweater. You're identifying a causal relationship between that thing and the sustenance and advancing of your life. And that's a positive relationship. You identify something as evil, it has a harmful causal relationship between your life. Rationality is a value because it's your commitment to facts, it's your commitment to truth, it's your commitment to reason.
Yeah.
It's your commitment to your faculty of knowledge. That's how you live. So it's a commitment to that. That's a good thing. You should value that. And other things in faith, I don't think you should value that because it means in the realm in which you have faith, it means you shut down your mind and you make your means of knowledge inoperative.
Are you optimistic that as the world is moving forward, there is going to be more embrace of a rational morality?
I'll ask. I wouldn't put it so much in the issue of optimism or pessimism. What I would put it is, if you talk to younger people, the people who've spent less time in the universities and in the culture, which I think is generally bad and disorienting. The younger the people are that you talk to, the more receptive they are to rationality. The more receptive they want clarity. They want answers that make sense to them. They don't want to have to. I mean, so faith is a default. They don't want to have to default back to, well, I guess I should believe it because that's what I was told. No, they want to understand. And children are like this. You know, they don't like following orders. I can tell you that. I don't have kids, but I've worked with them for a long time, and they do not like to just obey. I was like this as a kid. It's like my dad would tell me to do something, and I shouldn't say my dad. We're being filmed, but someone. No. If I was ever told that, do it, because I said so, and I would always say, why did you say so?
Yeah.
Because I want the answers, and you have to struggle with them. But I think it's the younger they are, the more receptive they are to this thing. That's why, one of the things we do is we spend a lot of time dealing with younger people. Yeah.
You've been talking about these subjects in Latin America for the Ayn Rand Con. What has been the response?
I think it's been largely positive. I think maybe some of that is skewed to they're all coming to our conference. They're
Right.
coming to a conference where we're talking about these
Yeah.
kinds of things, and part of the program says that these are the kind of ideas we're talking about. But what's interesting is they come to the conference. They sign up, they register, they travel from around Latin America to come because they're. I mean, there's a sense that we're not hearing these ideas anywhere else.
Yeah.
They are interesting and challenging. And many of them want the challenge, and they want to ask themselves, yeah, these are questions I should be answering, and maybe I agree, maybe I don't agree, but if I'm not answering these questions, I'm not getting anything fundamentally different.
Right.
And that's I think one of the things, I think the best thing a philosophy or a philosophic perspective can give you is not just a new fact here or there. Oh, I didn't know there were 9 planets. I thought there were 8. Okay, now I know there are 9. It's not just there's a factor or 2 that
Yeah.
you are missing. It gets you to look at the world from a different perspective. So it gives you it will often give you like a shift in perspective. Like I see the world in a different way now. I see myself in a different way. And I think if it's a good way, that can be one of the most powerful things a philosophy can do, is to help you see the world through different eyes. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Aaron, for this interview, and I hope that it brings even more questions to people that are watching it. Because at the end, that's the effort, right? Like putting your own mind into the challenge of confronting new ideas and see what you think. And also, I would like you to finish about the process of doing so, because you have been very keen in your talks about it is a process, and sometimes accepting something as a truth because you can rationally grasp it doesn't mean that your emotion is gonna immediately follow. It might take
Yeah.
time.
Oh, yeah.
And you shouldn't be scared about that.
Yeah. I mean, that's a normal process of the pursuit, not just of truth in general, or not specifically truth in general, but it's on about philosophic issues. Because your philosophic framework, it's like your skeleton. It's if I told you, there's a Mercedes out in front of the hotel here, and turns out there's not. Okay, well, it's not a big deal. If I tell you the whole way you think about life is wrong, like your goals are wrong, you're wrong. In effect, it's like reaching into your, shaking
Yeah.
your framework, and
Yeah.
that's uncomfortable. And I know people that they start thinking about these ideas, and they start to think, yeah, there's something here. There's something I should be thinking about. Maybe I am wrong. Maybe the way I face life is wrong. Maybe I'm pursuing the wrong values. Maybe I'm kind of screwed up in the way I'm pursuing these kinds of things, and
Yeah.
that's not. It's often not a pleasant feeling. But nonetheless, if you want the true, and you want to live by what's true, that's what it requires.
Thank you very much,
No,
Aaron.
my pleasure.
Until next time.
Okay.